The hum of the subterranean server room was always my sanctuary. I spent 3 grueling years drafting the structural algorithms for the Solstice Pavilion, a suspended glass and steel amphitheater meant to revitalize the entire downtown arts district. It was a delicate web of kinetic architecture, uniquely designed to flex and breathe with the unpredictable coastal winds. Every steel strut, every tension cable, and every pane of reinforced glass was calculated to the absolute millimeter. The project was my masterpiece, an elegant marriage of physics and aesthetics. Then Julian arrived. He was the chief executive officer's nephew, fresh out of an elite fast-track management program, possessing a vast wardrobe of custom-tailored suits and a profound, almost aggressive ignorance of applied physics. Julian's fundamental philosophy was that engineering was just a frustrating roadblock to visionary marketing. He hated my algorithms because they dictated the physical form of the building, rather than the other way around. He wanted the support pillars dramatically thinner, the glass expanses impossibly wider, and the overall construction budget essentially halved so he could secure a massive quarterly performance bonus for himself. I spent weeks attempting to explain to him why removing the secondary load-bearing dampers would eventually turn a mild ocean breeze into a catastrophic harmonic resonance. He waved me off with a manicured hand, calling my extreme caution outdated and detrimental to corporate synergy. The simmering tension finally peaked on a dreary Tuesday in late October. Julian called me into his expansive glass-walled office, which overlooked the bustling construction site, and slid a single crisp piece of paper across his polished mahogany desk. It was an official reassignment form. He smugly informed me that my role as lead systems architect was being entirely dissolved, my extensive duties absorbed by his newly formed rapid deployment design team. He had already gone behind my back, wiped my name from all the municipal regulatory filings, and replaced it with his own, claiming he was simply streamlining the bureaucratic chain of command. He smiled that polished, completely empty smile, and suggested I spend the next 6 months cataloging decaying archival blueprints in a windowless off-site storage facility until my employment contract quietly expired. He fully expected me to shout, to vehemently threaten a massive lawsuit, or to storm out and create a chaotic spectacle that he could easily use to justify firing me immediately for cause. Instead, I calmly picked up the paper, folded it neatly into perfect thirds, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I looked him dead in the eye, agreed that a profound change of scenery would be highly beneficial for my health, and walked back to my desk. I packed my heavy mechanical keyboard, my framed vintage topographical map of the city, and my favorite titanium travel mug. I surrendered my encrypted building access card to the front desk without uttering a single word. Julian truly thought he had won a grand victory. He had absolutely no idea that he had just stepped onto a digital landmine of his own arrogant design. You see, modern architectural algorithms are not just static drawings on a page. For a dynamic, breathing structure like the pavilion, the software relies on a continuous active telemetry loop. The sensitive tension sensors buried deep in the foundation columns feed raw data back to a central processor, which then continually adjusts the massive hydraulic dampeners to keep the building stable. To prevent a catastrophic cyber attack or an unauthorized, lethal alteration to the core code, I had painstakingly hard-coded a rolling 30-day verification sequence into the deepest layer of the system. Every 30 days, the lead engineer of record had to physically authenticate the structural parameters using a specialized token and a rotating cryptographic key. It was not a malicious trap. It was a completely standard safety compliance measure strictly mandated by the state's Kinetic Architecture Oversight Board. Julian had eagerly signed the final design overview documents without bothering to read a single page of the dense technical appendices. He had just exiled the only living person who held the cryptographic key, and he had exactly 29 days before the entire structural system entered an automatic, irreversible failsafe lockdown. I spent the next few weeks enjoying a remarkably peaceful, fully paid vacation. I drank rich black coffee on my back porch, read heavy historical novels I had neglected for years, and took extraordinarily long, quiet walks along the rocky coastline. Meanwhile, construction on the Solstice Pavilion moved forward at a breakneck, terrifying pace. Julian was constantly parading important city officials through the site, taking endless photographs in a pristine white hard hat, and loudly boasting about his brilliant cost-saving measures to anyone who would listen. He had directly ordered the construction crew to entirely omit the installation of the secondary dampeners to make the canopy look sleeker, completely ignoring the complex, unforgiving mathematics that ultimately kept the massive panes of glass from shattering into dust. On day 25, the sensitive structural sensors began to detect highly anomalous vibrations. The seasonal coastal winds were naturally picking up, and without the crucial secondary dampeners installed, the kinetic energy had absolutely nowhere to go. The automated digital system tried desperately to compensate, but the required parameters were firmly locked behind my missing cryptographic key. On day 28, the city's independent safety inspector paid a surprise visit to the site and immediately noticed microscopic fractures forming along the primary load-bearing joints. The inspector, alarmed by the structural groaning, formally demanded the raw telemetry data and the recent recalibration logs. Julian, completely out of his depth and sweating profusely, tried to bluff his way through the tense inspection. He threw meaningless corporate buzzwords at the veteran inspector, claiming the tiny fractures were just expected settling patterns for a building of this magnitude. The inspector was not remotely amused by the performance. He immediately issued a formal binding stop-work order and gave the firm exactly 48 hours to produce the cryptographic recalibration data, or face the immediate condemnation and forced demolition of the entire $90 million site. The invisible countdown had finally reached its critical terminal phase. Word of the impending disaster trickled out back to me through a few loyal former colleagues who called my personal number in an absolute panic. The corporate office was in a state of unmitigated chaos. Julian's highly paid synergy team of junior designers spent frantic, sleepless hours trying to hack into the very software system I had specifically built to be impenetrable to outside interference. They desperately tried wiping the local servers, bypassing the digital locks, and even physically dismantling the hydraulic controllers. Their reckless meddling only triggered a secondary security alarm that immediately alerted the state Environmental Protection Agency to a potential hazardous fluid leak. The more they panicked and thrashed against the constraints, the tighter the digital snare pulled around them. On the morning of day 30, the ultimate failsafe triggered exactly as programmed. The entire pavilion forcefully locked into its most rigid, unyielding configuration to logically prevent a total collapse, completely halting all construction activity. Millions of dollars in heavy machinery were securely trapped under the locked canopy, and the entire project was paralyzed. That afternoon, my mobile phone rang. It was Julian. His previously arrogant, mocking tone was entirely replaced by a desperate, tight-lipped plea. He frantically offered me a massive consulting fee, triple my old hourly rate, if I would just discreetly meet him at an obscure diner outside of town and hand over the verification token. He repeatedly promised to keep it quiet, to handle all the human resources paperwork, to make it incredibly worth my while. I listened to his frantic, shallow breathing for a long moment, then calmly and politely informed him that I was currently thoroughly enjoying my off-site archival duties and simply could not possibly compromise state safety regulations for a private, undocumented cash offer. I hung up the phone and turned the device completely off. The final resolution did not happen in a quiet office, a private email chain, or a secretive diner. It happened the following Tuesday morning at the heavily publicized open city council hearing. The mayor had furiously summoned the entire executive board of Julian's firm to publicly explain why a massive public investment was currently frozen in a digital failsafe lockdown and slowly cracking under the ambient ocean breeze. Julian stood at the wooden podium, sweating profusely through his expensive custom suit, stammering incoherently about unforeseen software glitches and highly unusual atmospheric anomalies. He looked incredibly small, entirely stripped of his unearned corporate armor and false confidence. Then, the heavy oak double doors at the back of the chamber opened. I walked down the center aisle, not as a disgruntled former employee seeking petty revenge, but as an independent kinetic architecture expert officially subpoenaed by the mayor's office. I calmly took the microphone at the adjacent witness stand. Over the next 45 minutes, I meticulously and scientifically dismantled Julian's entire narrative. I projected the raw, undeniable telemetry data onto the massive digital screens positioned behind the seated council members. I thoroughly explained the absolute necessity of the 30-day cryptographic verification, the catastrophic danger of removing the secondary dampeners, and the sheer, staggering negligence required to authorize such massive structural changes without fundamentally understanding the underlying physics. I did not raise my voice once. I did not display a single ounce of anger. I did not have to. The undeniable mathematics did all of the execution for me. The professional fallout was spectacularly swift and absolute. The city council voted immediately to revoke Julian's firm's lucrative contract on the spot, officially citing gross negligence and the reckless endangerment of public safety. Julian was physically escorted out of the chamber by municipal security, his short career entirely incinerated by the undeniable public record. The mayor, furious at the delay but highly pragmatic about the sunk costs, looked down from the dais and asked me directly what it would logically take to save the Solstice Pavilion from the wrecking ball. I looked back at the complex structural blueprints still illuminated on the massive screen. I calmly told the council that I could easily recalibrate the locked system and expertly oversee the immediate installation of the required dampeners, provided I was contracted directly by the city itself, completely independent of any corporate oversight, and at precisely double my original annual salary. The council debated for less than 3 minutes before voting unanimously to approve the motion right there in the open chamber. I walked out of the municipal building that sunny afternoon holding a highly lucrative direct contract. The strong wind coming off the harbor felt remarkably refreshing against my face, serving as a perfect reminder that true leverage is not about shouting the loudest or fighting the hardest. It is simply about knowing exactly where the immense weight of the world truly rests, and choosing the perfect moment to step out of the way.